Good morning. I'm Charles Osgood, and this is Sunday Morning. If you haven't heard already, then I am sorry to be the one to have to tell you that our good friend Charles Kuralt died the day before yesterday at the age of 62. He died on the 4th of July, as if to be claimed forever by the country he spent so much of his life traveling and telling stories of. We will spend our time this morning, almost all of it, remembering him and listening again to some of those stories he told here on Sunday Morning and out there on the road. Come along, was what he said. Come and see. There are sights in this country and people in this country to banish any gloom you ever may feel and to fill you instead with wonder. Every road is as good as a promise, and the promises all will be kept. And do not worry about getting lost. I have gone on ahead and know the way. It was true, he did know the way. And we will follow our good friend as far as we can later this Sunday morning. And do you know what he did when he retired from meandering around America? What he did was meander around America some more. There were places he loved too much to stay away from for very long.
This is your friend Kuralt paddling his own canoe.
You look pretty happy there.
I am happy there. You know, anybody would be happy. You can paddle this canoe across this lake, Moose Lake, and camp, and put the canoe in another lake the next day and paddle across that lake and camp and make another little portage to the next lake the third day, and so on. And you can do that for 100 years.
From Tom Jefferson's house in Virginia to Independence Hall, to Texas, to North Carolina, to Moscow. We will follow in some of Charles Kuralt's footsteps this morning. If we had 10 times 90 minutes to spend, we could not follow in all of them. But he was a newsman, and he would say now, the news must come first. And so it does. Here are the headlines for Sunday morning, the 6th of July. As of a few hours ago, a small six-wheeled vehicle called Sojourner is on the surface of the planet Mars. Human beings never have sent a controllable land vehicle as far as that before. Our CBS News space consultant Bill Harwood is in Pasadena at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory for which Sojourner is being operated. Good morning, Bill.
Good morning, Charles.
Bill, they had some kind of a problem yesterday and last night. I take it they've overcome that?
They sure did, and there were some really anxious moments. They had survived this improbable landing by bouncing on the surface of Mars. The spacecraft had opened up as they expected, but they lost communications between the lander portion of the spacecraft and the little rover that's going to go scoot around on the surface of Mars. Some very anxious moments. They radioed up some commands that the spacecraft executed overnight on its own at Mars, and that resolved the problem. The rover was working great, so they went ahead and deployed it.
So what is the next step now?
Well, the rover's been on the surface all night on that cold, forbidding surface. They're going to take some pictures with the rover today where it'll actually look back at its own lander, sort of looking at itself, if you will, and they're going to begin some science observations. They're going to study the soil, the mineralogy of that area right around the lander, and they're very excited to start getting those results back.
They have to wait for daybreak to do that?
They sure do. It's a solar-powered spacecraft, of course, and they wait for the sun to rise on Mars, which will be late this afternoon, and then the rover will wake up and begin doing its business.
What are some of the first things that they'll be trying to photograph?
Well, they're really going to look at do a 360-degree pan. They call it a monster pan, where the cameras on the little rover are going to take a 360-degree view of the landing site, including the lander itself that brought it there. But the real goal of this rover is to do science. It's got an instrument on board that's going to help the scientists study the mineralogy, the chemical structure of the rocks and soils on Mars, and that's a first. They've never been able to do that before, make those sort of direct measurements to understand the history of Mars, of course with the long-term goal of finding out if there ever could have been conditions or even life in the ancient past.
Thank you, Bill. Bill Harwood in Pasadena. Not just on Mars, but at Wimbledon, too, history was made yesterday when 16-year-old Martina Hingis became the youngest champion there in more than a century. Hingis defeated Jana Novotná 2-6, 6-3, 6-3. The men's final today is between Pete Sampras of the United States and Cédric Pioline of France. When Sunday Morning continues, we will do what we can to thank the best storyteller television has ever had.
The best is what we bring you. Best from the earth is what you'll see.
At Wegmans, when it comes to growing fresh fruits and vegetables, we believe Mother Nature often knows best. That's why, working with Cornell University and our local growers, Wegmans is leading the way in the use of more innovative natural growing methods. It's a program called Integrated Pest Management, and it helps make sure the produce you get at Wegmans is not only the best from the earth, but also the best for the earth.
Wonderful world, beautiful people. Best from the earth is what you'll see.
Wegmans Produce. Every day, you get our best.
When Christine's wedding dress gets some minor alterations,
You saw the dress. Bad luck. Bad luck.
Coach tries to avoid a major altercation.
I take full responsibility for the fact that it is completely ruined. Although it is not my fault.
Will Christine notice the slight modifications?
We spray painted the blue and the black spots, and then we spackled the hole.
On the next,
Now remember, it's not sanded yet.
Coach.
Monday on Channel 8 WROZ.
For Marty Aarons, the road to Rochester began in Albany, then Buffalo. He's worked in both cities, but now Rochester's home. Renee Phillips is a Western New York native. Her family's in Buffalo, but her home is here. Marty Aarons and Renee Phillips bring you News 8 Tonight. News with a perspective and stories that really matter. As a team, they work well together because they're on your side. Weeknights.
He was born in Wilmington, North Carolina, on the 10th of September, 1934, to a school teacher and a social worker, and had a radio show of his own before he was old enough legally to operate a car. His mother would drive him to the station. He had evidently already settled the matter of what kind of life he wanted. You can see it in his eyes, even as a boy, and then as a young man in jacket and tie. He knew what he was meant to be, and knew too, I think, that it wouldn't take him very long. It didn't take him very long. Barely out of college in North Carolina, Charles Kuralt went to work for CBS News.
What they're practicing for is not just a game. The World Series is an event in search of a hero.
Which was where he stayed for 37 years.
It was just about here that Jacques Cartier stopped in 1534, unable to maneuver his boat past the rapids of the St. Lawrence River. Where he stopped, other men are beginning on this April afternoon in 1959. This is where the St. Lawrence Seaway begins.
In a moment, an eyewitness report on Cuba Today by correspondent Charles Kuralt.
He stayed at CBS News, yes, but he did not stay put. From the very first, Charles Kuralt was a traveling man.
The Bossa Nova's been hanging around in this alley in Copacabana for a long time, a new cult waiting for some members. The tourists all walked right by on their way to the big nightclubs, where the samba reminded them that they were in Brazil, and where the twist reminded them that by jet they're only 9.5 hours from the Peppermint Lounge.
Dismissed by his employer, deserted by his union, unneeded by his community, ignored by his country, except for $56 a month in food stamps, I.B. Johnson mines only enough coal now to keep his own family warm. And nobody pays him for that.
He liked to say that he never was a real reporter. That wasn't true. He was.
Everything you're about to see took place in Vietnam on Christmas and on the days just preceding Christmas. We thought you might be interested to know what it was like.
He went to all the dangerous places reporters are supposed to go.
That morphine will take hold in about 15 minutes.
Alpha Oscar, this is Alpha November, over.
If you're the kind who prays, you might pray that these other brave men, the 3rd Platoon of A Company, all leave this terrible place safely and come home to you next Christmas. The temperature is only about 10.
And he went to some places no one is supposed to go.
The thing about the Arctic in the spring is that you go along with beautiful weather, the sun shining down, Blue sky overhead, a gentle breeze, and then a blow like this comes along to remind you where you are.
And in all those places, he did brilliant, memorable work.
People who come from towns where the streets are named Oak or Maple or Main are always disturbed by the cold, anonymous sound of New York street names. It's true that 117th isn't exactly the most romantic or imaginative name for a street, but you shouldn't conclude from that 117th Street is just a line on the crosstown grid of Manhattan. This block between Lenox and 7th is as interesting and varied as your block.
If you begin to get a little tall, I ought to pack up my things and haul.
He always got the facts, of course.
117th Street still exerts its pull on people. They call themselves 17th Streeters, and even those who grew up here and moved away often come back.
But he got something else, too. Something that other reporters tend to miss. He got the meaning of the story. And he put the meaning in such a way that we came to think we had known it all along. Only we hadn't.
As high as you can go on 117th Street is to the 5th floor rooftops. Up there you can keep pigeons, or read a book, or make love, or occasionally be alone if that's what you want, but you cannot go higher.
He made it sound like folk wisdom, burnished over time. But it was his wisdom, burnished by his writing and his skill.
A country of 14 million people, a sovereign nation among the nations of the world, in which there is not one doctor, not one lawyer, no courts and no judges, and in which the only law is the rule of violence. This is the Congo.
As it turned out, however, danger was not what interested him.
I have miles and miles ahead of me.
Decency was what interested him. And so in 1967, in his own country, in a bus, he set out in search of that.
Oh, he said he was the best, and I trusted him.
There you go.
The philosopher Diogenes wandered ancient Greece, lantern in hand, looking, in vain he feared, for even one honest man. Charles Kuralt did better than Diogenes.
This is a song you'll never hear again, the song of the Gandhi dancer.
Oh, lay my ball in the middle of the pack and go down to the Camden Bank, baby, mama.
He found honest men, and honest women too, by the hundreds.
The man moaning in the background is our cameraman. Mr. Blackman had just been put through a snap roll by a little old lady of 80.
That's good for your veins.
And directed our attention to them for 25 years on the road.
Bill Patch is one of those American tinkerers. By tinkering with valves and pipes in an old tea kettle, he converted his Nash Rambler to corncob power.
Well, if we could just get that right combination.
Nobody could accuse you of wasting any string lately.
No, not.
He had already been to every state of the Union by the time he did that all over again in a single year for the bicentennial of this country, filing one report from each state every week for 50 weeks for the CBS Evening News.
This is town meeting day.
And he went, or so it began to seem, to every hamlet of every state, too.
He was shot through the heart.
No matter how out of the way his destination may have been, he always brought meaning back with him.
John A. Mathis, June 10th, 1856.
What was it that animated him? I asked him that once, not too long ago. I'm not calling for you to criticize your journalistic colleagues here, but it seems to me admiration is in sort of short supply, generally speaking, in the world of reporting.
Well, it's unsophisticated, isn't it, to admire your subject. You're supposed to investigate your subject and have a healthy skepticism about what he says. I suspended my skepticism a long time ago. It's so much more fun, though unsophisticated, maybe even unprofessional in a journalist. It's so much more fun just to sit there and enjoy the guy and learn a few things.
Come meet a school of mermaids, if maids is the right word.
Don't you feel a little old for this?
No, we go on the theory that growing old is only a bad habit that a busy person has no time to form.
He watched us and learned a few things. We watched him and learned a lot. About mailboxes and clotheslines. About a man who provided bicycles to children who would not have had them otherwise. About a landlocked farmer with a dream of the sea. About some men who made a bridge, and one man who made bricks all his long life. About a scholar in a cabin in the woods, and small towns. About an American born in Russia who went home finally late in his life to bring tears to the eyes of his countrymen. And about another old man of Russia who never did leave, but who waited 50 years for someone to carry his message of gratitude to the American soldiers who saved his life during the Second World War. We learned about steam engines and dominoes and a doctor you could pay with a handshake. We learned about a league of women who banded together once upon a time to feed a multitude, and a road builder working all by himself, and a fisherman, and a jogger of 104.
Humiliated by a 104-year-old man.
It was a non-fiction novel he was writing in installments over the course of a long career, the theme of which was that the heartland of this country extends from coast to coast, from the Black Hills to the Rio Grande, and from Puget Sound to the Florida Keys. We all inhabit the heartland, we learned. And now we all think we knew these people from the first, and these truths. But we didn't, and never would have known them without this Walt Whitman carrying a reporter's pad, who heard America singing, and who went out to collect its songs so we could hear them too.
Good morning. Here begins something new.
He had a regular stand as well for 15 years on this broadcast. Here too, all along, decency was his interest. Before Charles Kuralt and Sunday Morning came along, there was no place on television for this country's great makers of music or of art, or for the great contributors to its spirit. He made a place for them. From the giants of our day to the small stories that turned out not to be small, he preserved for us every reason we have as a country to be hopeful. How much would we have overlooked? How much would we have forgotten? How much would we have failed to understand had we not had the chance to see ourselves through his eyes?
Wisdom means having the wealth of experience that would enable one to see beyond the obvious.
Wisdom comes from insight.
A 50-year history means that you have an enormous reservoir of background knowledge and experience to call on.
There are 40,000 of us who get to draw on each other's experience. We get to draw on each other's wisdom. And I think that really makes the difference.
For the time of your life.
I don't shower before work. I email over oatmeal. I take conference calls in my pajamas. Just take a look at the area that I'm highlighting there. That works. I document conference, I page, I fax, I work out, I get tons done. I still don't shower. I pray we never, ever get video conferencing.
Fibercon or Metamucil, both have fiber for regularity. But I like Fibercon better.
Same natural action of fiber, but only Fibercon contains calcium.
And with Fibercon, I get my fiber in 2 caplets.
Fibercon, fiber and calcium in a convenient caplet.
I'm 62. Can I still help prevent osteoporosis?
It's never too late for Caltrate. Caltrate Plus has the extra calcium you need, plus 6 nutrients essential for healthy bones, whatever your age.
It's never too late for Caltrate.
What Charles Kuralt loved most about this country was its big-heartedness, its willingness to take in so many different people of so many different kinds from so many different places. On another 4th of July some years ago, to remind us of that big-heartedness, he took us all to see the most American spectacle he could think of. He took us to watch the country literally growing greater with the addition of some new citizens sworn in on a certain hallowed lawn of Virginia.
I spent yesterday, the 4th of July, at Mr. Jefferson's house in Virginia. Jefferson died on the 4th, 50 years to the day after his Declaration of Independence was read to the world, and somebody had put roses on his grave. On his front lawn, 97 people of 28 nationalities were about to become citizens of the country he declared free for us and them. Pick one of them from the crowd to see what sort of citizen we gained yesterday. Shah Wali Abdi, 29 years old, of Afghanistan. Are you excited too?
Very much so, yeah. I've been smiling all day and all the weekend.
If you think you had a full holiday weekend, consider his. To begin with, on Friday, he was married.
For richer, for poorer.
For richer, for poor.
In sickness and in health.
In sickness and in health.
Wali, raised a Muslim, stood there in the old Price Fork United Methodist Church in Blacksburg, Virginia, and was married to Angela Marie Surface Cooper, daughter of a good Montgomery County Methodist family. She is also the mother of 3 children, so just to start the weekend, Wali Abdi became both a husband and a father. Naturally, that was on the mind of our new citizen even before he became a citizen.
These children mean a lot to me. I think for me the best way to give it back to the United States is to help my wife, Angela, raise these children to become decent citizens, to become decent people, and they will do in turn their share of contribution to the country.
So there was the happiness of Angela and the children, but this was a complicated weekend. His thoughts also turned back to the family he left behind in Afghanistan.
I never forget that moment when I was at the airport. I hugged my father and the tears rolled down my eyes, you know. I never forget. I really never forget that day. I think the sad part was that when I got in the airplane, I didn't know. I didn't know whether I could come back.
He hasn't gone back for 9 years, and as long as the Russian troops are in Afghanistan, he won't. He'll stay in Blacksburg studying for his PhD at Virginia Tech, an educational researcher and teacher working hard. He had papers to grade yesterday, but he had to put that off. He had a date at Monticello. Yesterday, he and Angela settled in their places on the famous hill at Charlottesville to wait for his name to be called.
Shah Wali Abdi.
With his old passport and his new marriage certificate in his hand, he attended to one last little bit of American bureaucracy.
Good morning, sir. I'm fine. How are you?
Traffic violation?
Yeah, I had 2 speeding tickets, and I paid them.
Okay. 2 speeding. Okay. And have you been married since your...
I'm married on Friday.
Friday?
With nothing to mar his record but 3 speeding tickets, he was approved for citizenship for the final time, along with the other men and women with foreign-sounding names.
Errol Dursun Dogane.
And what he said, they all must have been thinking.
I feel very happy. I really feel it. I feel it in my heart.
How you cross?
There are a lot of people who don't know, I guess, how important it is to be an American, because they're born here, they grew up with it, and they take it for granted.
I hereby declare on oath.
He raised his right hand with the others and said a few words about renouncing every foreign prince, potentate, state, and sovereignty.
So help me God.
And the last vow of his long weekend was taken, and Wali Abdi became Wally, which his American friends have called him all along.
You have just become a citizen of the greatest country the world has ever known. This is true not because
Thomas Jefferson, as president, proposed that the United States offer hospitality and asylum to those he called oppressed humanity, unhappy fugitives from distress. I imagine that Mr. Jefferson, knowing what's going on in Afghanistan and knowing Wali Abdi as a scholar like him, would have approved of the proceedings on his lawn yesterday. 97 people from 28 countries became citizens of the United States. I got to know this one. The 4th of July made me proud for him. Proud for us, too.
What did you eat this weekend?
A couple of burgers Friday night.
A couple of donuts.
2 tacos.
Barbecue ribs.
Chocolate cheesecake Saturday night.
Some pancakes for brunch. Gee, that's funny. I should have exploded about an hour ago.
If you kind of ate your way through the weekend, start turning things around tomorrow with Kellogg's Special K cereal. Just 110 calories, not a speck of fat. Get those delicious, lightly toasted Special K flakes. Let your taste buds continue to enjoy. Start taking off what you took on this weekend. Make Monday Special K Day.
All businesses start small. Their financial needs met by commercial banks. Those that grow large head to Wall Street, leaving mid-sized companies nowhere to turn. Suppose someone closed that gap, giving any size company access to the services of a commercial bank and the savvy of a Wall Street investment banker. Are you ready to cross that bridge?
These are our kids, and just like your kids, sometimes it seems what we tell them goes in one ear and out the other. But guess what? When it comes to making tough decisions like whether or not to drink, kids say parents have more influence than anyone. That's why we offer free advice from professionals on how to talk to your kids. When we show them we care, what we say stays with them. Let's work together to stop underage drinking before it starts.
This is the way they celebrate the 4th in Somerset, Wisconsin. What is? This is Tubin on the Apple River.
The fireworks continue. NASCAR's hottest Grand Nationals Todd Bodine, Randy LaJoie, and rookie sensation Steve Park fight to the finish at the Milwaukee Mile. Today on CBS.
After 3 rounds, Tiger Woods is tied for the lead. It will be a fight to the finish at the Motorola Western Open on CBS.
CBS. Welcome home.
Hello, I'm Phil Nothnagel, president of Nothnagel Realtors. For many years, our Showcase of Homes has provided thousands of viewers with the opportunity to see what homes are available without leaving the comfort of their own home. Well, while you were looking for a home, we were too. You see, the Sunday Showcase has moved to WROC Channel 8. We invite you to be our guest every Sunday, starting the 13th of July from 10:30 a.m. to 11. And be sure to visit us often, because everybody has to move sometime.
You like the juice there, son?
Dad, this sun-kissed orange juice suggests an exemplary blend of premium Valencia and mid-season oranges. The opening is well composed, yet flowery. The body is sweet, but not overpowering, with a delightful finish. In my humble opinion, 5 stars.
Introducing Premium Sun-Kissed Orange Juice. The best oranges, now the best orange juice.
I'm Rick Dorschel reminding you that you get the best for less at Dorschel Oldsmobile. Best car, best selection, and best value when you buy your new Oldsmobile at Dorschel's guaranteed low price.
Dorschel Oldsmobile has a full-size Olds 88, a Consumer Digest Best Buy for just $19,997. A new Cutlass Supreme is just $16,997. Both cars have power windows and locks, air conditioning, stereo cassette, cruise control, and more.
The best for less at Dorschel Oldsmobile, West Henrietta Road, where you can demand better and get the best.
Tomorrow on Channel 8 WROC.
It's Sunday morning on CBS, and here again is Charles Osgood.
He studied American history in school, but it was not history as in cold marble or on dusty shelves the way he told its stories as a reporter later on. These events of the past, he made clear, were the living muscles of the American body politic, still being flexed and used every day of all our lives. Back during the bicentennial of this country, for instance, he took us to Philadelphia, into the very room in which the framers sat. Listen to Charles Kuralt at Independence Hall and tell me if it doesn't sound as if he had been there himself, not just in 1976, but in 1776 too. The passion of the arguments there seemed still to be ringing in his ears.
John Adams and his cousin Sam, hot for independence, impatient with the delay, sat over here, listening. Thomas Jefferson sat back here in the corner. He had already written the Declaration of Independence. It spoke his thoughts. Beside him here, old Benjamin Franklin, also silent, his mind made up. But every mind was not made up. Pennsylvania and South Carolina were opposed to independence. Delaware divided, New York undecided. All through the spring and into the summer, they had sat here and wrangled, their tempers growing hot with the season. Young Edward Rutledge of South Carolina, who sat here, had said of John Adams and the New Englanders, "They will bring us ruin." Now, Rutledge and Adams and the rest, listen to John Dickinson speaking gravely from the heart. Declaring our independence at a time like this is like burning down our house before we have another. It was John Adams who rose to his feet. He was not John Dickinson's equal as a speaker, and everything he had to say, he had said before. He never said it better than on that July afternoon. We have been duped and bubbled by the phantom of peace. What is the real choice before us? If we postpone the Declaration, do we mean to submit? Do we consent to yield and become a conquered people? No, we do not. We shall fight. We shall fight with whatever means we have, with rusty muskets and broken flints, with bows and arrows if need be. Then why put off the Declaration? For myself, I can only say this. I have crossed the Rubicon. All that I have, all that I am, all that I hope for in this life, I stake on our cause. For me, the die is cast. Sink or swim, live or die, to survive or perish with my country, that is my unalterable resolution. That night, John Dickinson went home, put on his militia uniform, and rode away to join his regiment. He could not vote for independence, but he could fight the British. That night, Edward Rutledge changed his mind. South Carolina would not stand in the way of unanimity. That night, Caesar Rodney, a man dying of cancer, rode through the night on horseback in a storm to Philadelphia to cast the deciding vote for Delaware. And so when Secretary Charles Thompson called the roll on July 2nd of the 12 colonies voting, all 12 declared for independence. It was done. What remained was the declaring it. The next morning, July 3rd, an anonymous note was found up here on President Hancock's table. It said, "You have gone too far. Take care. A plot is framed for your destruction, and all of you shall be destroyed." It suddenly occurred to them that there might be a lighted powder keg under this floor. There was an uproar. There were volunteers to search the cellar. Then crusty old Joseph Hughes of North Carolina, who sat here, stood up to say, Mr. President, I am against wasting any time searching cellars. I would as soon be blown to pieces as proclaim to the world that I was frightened by a note without searching any cellars. The Continental Congress proceeded to a consideration of the Declaration of Independence. They are immortal words now, but of course they weren't when Charles Thomson read them for the first time, when in the course of human events, and for 2 days Jefferson sat back there in the corner and fumed as they all toyed with his masterpiece. Did we really have to call the king a tyrant quite so often? They changed some of the tyrants back to king. Did we have to bid the British people our everlasting adieu? They struck that out. And Jefferson's mightiest passage, his denunciation of slavery, that was struck out too at the insistence of Georgia and South Carolina. Jefferson wrote elsewhere, nothing is more certainly written in the book of fate than that these people are to be free. But finally, all the cuts and changes were done, and what remained was a document still noble enough to inspire the tired delegates and bold enough to hang them all. It was read through one more time to the end. And for the support of this declaration, with a firm reliance on the protection of divine providence, we mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor. There was one final vote, and President Hancock announced the result with the use of a new phrase. The Declaration of the United States of America is unanimously agreed to. There was no cheering, no fireworks, not yet. The delegates simply walked out into the night of the 4th of July thinking their own thoughts. Some of them, no doubt, remembering what John Dickinson had said. This is like burning down our house before we have another. Others hearing Tom Paine. The birthday of a new world is at hand. We have it in our power to begin the world all over again. John Adams walked to his boarding house to write a letter to a friend. Well, he said, the river is passed. The bridge is cut away.
The thing I love most is opening people's eyes to new ideas.
We've got to stay up to speed and cutting edge on what might be happening and taking place in these emerging countries.
Investing in an emerging market brings capital and resources to that market.
It's exciting to watch the transformation of the region and realize that we've been a part of it and we've made a difference.
Dear Mrs. Responsible, you never missed a school play. You remember everyone's birthday, including your father-in-law's. You never went on a golf weekend. With all due respect, ma'am, you're due. This is the Buick Riviera. You can get a supercharged engine. It's bigger than some minivans, but it only seats 4, so it's not the perfect family car. That's the point. The Buick Riviera. You're due. Definitely due.
So you're looking for a new hobby. Good choice. Okay, you got the gear. Now you need a river. Perfect. How about a casting lesson? Better make that 2. Thanks to IBM, all of this can be arranged in one place. LLbean.com is more than just a website. It's bringing LL Bean closer to their customers, and their customers closer to nature. Canoeing's an option, too. Now, if IBM can do it for LL Bean, they can probably do it for you.
You know, AT&T is making things simple now, even when you're away from home.
Did you say simple even when you're away from home?
Yeah, just dial 1-800-CALL-ATT.
Why not just dial 0?
Can't be sure who you'll get.
So, 1-800-CALL-ATT.
That's the guaranteed way of knowing you're getting AT&T.
Calling card calls?
Sure.
Collect calls?
All your calls.
Long distance calls?
Yeah.
Even local calls?
All calls.
Bird calls?
I didn't think of that.
1-800-CALL-ATT. When you're on the go, it's the only number you need to know.
Where would a deadbeat dad get $500,000 to give to the Republican Party during the 1992 election? Ask these Japanese businessmen. They know.
Contributions from foreign nationals are illegal.
So the Republican Party gave the money back, right? Eye on America investigates Monday on the CBS Evening News.
Rather than be admired himself, which is what he feared might happen if he sat still for too long, Charles Kuralt liked to go out to find others to admire. And it was the quiet caretakers of this country that he admired most of all. Those engaged in saving and shoring up and spreading what too many others would pave and plow under and suffer to fade away. Because he loved the land, he loved the guardians of the land. Take Lady Bird Johnson of Texas, to whom our good friend paid a Sunday morning visit some years ago. Talk about admiration. The sun does not beam brighter on Lady Bird's wildflowers than he beamed in contemplation of the beauty that she and those flowers of hers had brought.
Along the roads of Texas this spring, the shoulders and median strips are awash in waves of red and blue. Have you noticed? Have you seen the California poppies raising their trumpets by the roadside? Or the acres of early daisies brightening the drab miles? Have you thought how kind nature has been to adorn busy highways with bright colors this way? Well, nature has had some help. Lady Bird Johnson has championed the cause of wildflowers all her life. That really, just look at that. That is really something to see.
Yeah, I walk by here and I sort of smile and I say, pretty good year. Now, there'll be other things.
Mrs. Johnson has a patch of her favorite bluebonnets and Indian paintbrush right outside her front door at the LBJ Ranch. Now here, it looks like you have a few that weren't invited.
I don't know. Well, I think it's just a dandelion, don't you? And I do not sneer at dandelions.
When she was First Lady, Mrs. Johnson thought beauty ought to be a national priority. And since then, she has never wavered from her goal to see the nation's highways, those featureless ribbons of pavement, edged and brightened, transformed by wildflowers.
You know, the highways may be America's biggest monument. The Romans had their fabulous temples and government buildings. It may be that the highways of America are one of our longest lasting productions. There's 74,000 miles of road here in Texas alone.
Describe to me what you see as you drive around Texas's highways in this season. I mean, what are all those flowers?
So what you see first is the Indian paintbrush, probably orange, red, spear-like. The bluebonnets next. That will be followed by sort of a Persian carpet of a great mixture, which will include lots and lots and lots of these little pink evening primrose that are so delicate and cup-like, and then a vast variety of yellow flowers, coreopsis, a dozen little yellow flowers that nobody can name, so they call them DYC, damn yellow composites.
When did you first get interested in wildflowers?
I grew up out in the country in deep East Texas in an old house that was built before the Civil War. My mother died when I was 5. My father was a very busy man, although a very loving man. I was left pretty much alone, and I walked the country roads and had a good time. It was a joy to me, and it's never failed me.
And Lady Bird Johnson has never failed her wildflowers. In 1987, she persuaded Congress to pass a bill to dedicate 1/4% of each state's highway landscaping budget to wildflowers. And she got people involved, not only the garden clubs, but also the state transportation departments that maintain the roads. Lady Bird Johnson made us see that highways could be beautiful. I imagine that people looking at these beautiful pictures will want to plant a wildflower garden of their own, a side yard or a nearby field. Is it a lot of work?
I don't want to say it's not, because that's not quite true.
You can't just get a few packets of seeds
and it's
and go
not
walking
just
through
like
the...
feeding chickens, just going out there. You have to make soil-seed contact. Scratch up the earth a little bit so that seed can find its home. Golly, I find so many people whom you would never have thought of being poetic, aesthetic, who love them and want them just as much as I do. It may be nostalgia, their memories of their childhood. It may just be a delight in color. It may be a revolt against having your world become homogenized. I want Texas to look like Texas, and Mississippi like Mississippi.
And California like California. And Nebraska like Nebraska. And North Carolina like North Carolina, with native catchfly and corn poppies and landsleeve coreopsis. This summer, when you're out on the highways in your state, discover wild mustard and rock rose and those DYCs, damn yellow composites, nodding by the side of the road. And say thank you to Lady Bird Johnson.
From where Forrest Gump told you his story to Alaska's Klondike Gold Rush, the home of the great American blues, and all the way to Santa Fe. Summer's greatest getaways, all this week on This Morning.
Ask the teacher. Ask the banker. Ask your neighbor. Experience counts. That's why millions of Americans have come to rely on the most experienced team in broadcast journalism. The CBS Evening News with Dan Rather. Experience you can trust.
If you dread Monday, here are 4 great reasons to change your mind. Cosby, Raymond, Sybil, Murphy. Spend your Monday night with the biggest stars in comedy. And think of it as an extended weekend.
Your father has finally done it.
What's that, buckle his pants? CBS Superstar Monday.
There's a naked lady back there and you drawing fruit? How old do I have to be before I get that disease?
Every show's a hit every Monday night on CBS.
You've been so many places, it's not hard to lose your way. It can make you long for somewhere you can call your own. Now the time has come to take that journey home where you belong. The address is CBS. Welcome home. We all came out to greet you. The address is CBS. Where entertainment's made for you. Drop your things and walk right in. You know where it's always been. The address is CBS. Welcome home.
In June, the pros swing into action at Locust Hill. In July, all eyes are on a field at Fredonia State. In August, stock cars take to a famed road course at Watkins Glen. 150,000 call it fun. You can call it NASCAR. And at Frontier Field, Red Wings, cracked bats, and rhinos charge just for kicks. All summer long and all around Western New York, John Kutchko will be chasing excitement. Follow his lead, weeknights on News 8.
On the road was where Charles Kuralt was truly happy. because that was where, out in the country, he knew he would find the stories that really mattered to him. These were not stories of the powerful or of the wealthy or of people of world-shaking consequence. Their stories he was content to leave to other reporters. But he was interested in greatness of a very particular kind, and he found it almost everywhere he went. Greatness of spirit was what he found, in one place, in a garage.
Every kid in Belmont, North Carolina seems to be riding a bike. And that's the story I want to tell you next. The one thing kids want, and parents want to be able to give them, is a bike. But here in this little town, as elsewhere, there are parents who just can't afford to do it. It hurt Jethro Mann to see kids growing up without bikes. See, he grew up without a bike.
They didn't leave you a bicycle?
And so, while Jethro Mann knows he can't find a solution to everything that's wrong in the world, he decided he could do something about this.
Let's see if we can get one for you.
In his garage, with broken bikes that he repaired, he started a sort of lending library of bicycles.
Somebody want to ride this bike?
Any kid can have one by just signing it out. I notice they're all pretty careful to check them out.
Yes. We try to use this as a learning situation for them. Teach them how to be responsible for something. Teach them that if they'll take care of other people's things, they can't help but take care of their own. And it works out pretty good.
Jethro Mann repairs the bikes for little kids, but this may be the most important part. He teaches little kids to repair the bikes for littler kids.
Get the air out and I mash it down with this.
This is the strongest memory we carried away from Mr. Mann's garage. Keith Henderson, 11, fixing a flat for Courtney Williams, 6.
All right. You're in for business. What do you say?
Thank
you. You're welcome.
You're welcome.
Turn it over for him. All right, sir. You have a good day.
Bicycle mechanics is not the only thing that is being taught here, as you can see.
I think a lot of times the politeness is a reflection. This is my way of thinking about it. Sometimes children will treat you kind of the way you treat them. I found that to be true all along the way. And the things that we say to the children, we have to live up to it.
Along toward supper time every evening, the bicycles return, and the children who signed them out carefully now sign them carefully back in. Jethro Mann has a full-time job, by the way, working for the state. He gives all his spare time to this. You can't get to know him without wondering whether you would have the patience to do what he is doing, or the money. I asked him if this didn't cost him most of his money.
Yes, a good bit of it, but I don't have many vices, so this is about my only vice. So I enjoy spending this that I would be spending on other things in a way that would be helpful to somebody.
When it gets dark each night and the kids go home, Jethro Mann goes in for his own supper. But he'll be out here later, probably, working on the bicycles, as he does very often until 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning.
I look at it this way. I have had a pretty good life myself, and I'm not apt to have very much more. But whatever I do have, I hope it will contribute to somebody else's welfare.
Good night, Mr. Mann. Good night to all such good people.
Thank y'all.
He liked being around Jethro Mann's quiet kind of greatness, the unassuming greatness of someone who saw what needed to be done and simply did it, without making a fuss or any claims for himself. In all those years on the road, he found hundreds of individuals who had that wonderful grace. And once, most memorably, he found an entire family, too.
This is a long road. It took 9 children out of the cotton fields, out of poverty, out of Mississippi. But roads go both ways, and today they all returned. This is about going away and coming home. One after another, and from every corner of America, the cars turned into the yard. With much cheering and much hugging, the 9 children of Alex and Mary Chandler were coming home for their parents' 50th wedding anniversary.
There's my daddy.
Gloria Chandler Coleman, Master of Arts, University of Missouri, a teacher in Kansas City, was home. All 9 children have memories of a sharecropper's cabin and nothing to wear and nothing to eat. All 9 are college graduates. Cooking the meal in the kitchen of the new house the children built for their parents 4 years ago is Bessie Chandler Beasley, B.A. Tuskegee, M.A. Central Michigan, dietitian at a veterans hospital, married to a Ph.D. And helping out, Princess Chandler Norman, M.A. Indiana University, a school teacher in Gary, Indiana. You'll meet them all. But first, I thought you ought to meet their parents. Alex Chandler remembers the time when he had a horse and a cow and tried to buy a mule and couldn't make the payments and lost the mule, the horse, and the cow. And about that time, Cleveland, the first son, decided he wanted to go to college.
We didn't have any money, and we went to town. He wanted to catch the bus to go on up there, so we went to town and borrowed $2.50 from her niece and bought him a bus ticket to go up there. And when he got up there, that's all he had.
From that beginning, he became Dr. Cleveland Chandler. He is chairman of the economics department at Howard University. How did they do it? Starting on one of the poorest farms in the poorest part of the poorest state in America.
We worked.
You picked cotton?
Yes, picked cotton. And pulled corn, stripped the millet, dug potatoes.
They all left. Luther left for the University of Omaha and went on to become the public service employment manager for Kansas City. He helped his younger brother James come to Omaha University too and go on to graduate work at Yale. And in his turn, James helped Herman in the blue suit there, who graduated from Morgan State and is a technical manager in Dallas. And they helped themselves. Fortson, a Baptist minister in Pueblo, Colorado, wanted to go to Morehouse College.
I chose Morehouse, and it was difficult for me, not getting in, but I had to pick cotton all summer long to get the first month's rent and tuition.
So, helping themselves and helping one another, they all went away. And now, 50 years after life began for the Chandler family in a one-room shack in a cotton field, now, just as they were sitting down in the new house to the ham and turkey and sweet potatoes and cornbread and collard greens and 2 kinds of pie and 3 kinds of cake, now Donald arrived, the youngest, who had driven with his family all the way down from Minneapolis. And now the Chandlers were all together again.
Our Father in heaven, we come at this moment giving thee thanks that thou hast been so good and so kind. Jesus. We want to thank you, oh God, for your love and for your Son. Thank you that you have provided for us through all these years.
Remembering all those years of sharecropping and going hungry and working for a white man for 50 cents a day and worrying about his children's future. Remembering all that, Alex Chandler almost didn't get through this blessing.
Jesus' name. Amen.
And neither did the others. The Chandler family started with as near nothing as any family in America ever did. And so their Thanksgiving weekend might have been more thankful than most. I'll Fly Away is the name of the old hymn. It is Mr. Chandler's favorite. His 9 children flew away and made places for themselves in this country, and this weekend came home again. There probably are no lessons in any of this, but I know that in the future, whenever I hear that the family is a dying institution, I'll think of them. Whenever I hear anything in America is impossible, I'll think of them.
From where Forrest Gump told you his story to Alaska's Klondike Gold Rush, the home of the great American blues, and all the way to Santa Fe. Go with us when we find summer's greatest getaways. Then the splendid beauty of Pamplona, Spain, where the bulls run rampant. But what happened when we ran with them? And Martha Stewart shows you how to handle a lobster this week on This Morning.
CBS. Welcome home.
I'm Rick Dorschel, reminding you that you get the best for less at Dorschel Oldsmobile. Best car, best selection, and best value when you buy your new Oldsmobile at Dorschel's guaranteed low price.
Dorschel Oldsmobile has a full-size Olds 88, a Consumer Digest Best Buy for just $19,997. A new Cutlass Supreme is just $16,997. Both cars have power windows and locks, air conditioning, stereo cassette, cruise control, and more.
The best for less at Dorschel Oldsmobile, West Henrietta Road, where you can demand better and get the best.
Wait till you see what I got of Michael Jordan.
Don't know whether Stedman's gonna like that next to my bed.
Then Mia Farrow speaks out about Woody Allen's affair with her daughter.
When you saw pictures of your daughter pornographically legs spread, how could you have let him back into your house?
Shock, betrayal.
I went in and told her I loved her. A week later, I slapped her. You know, the poor child is saying, I'm a bad girl.
Next, Oprah.
Monday on Channel 8 WROZ.
When Christine's wedding dress gets some minor alterations.
You saw the dress. Bad luck. Bad luck.
Coach tries to avoid a major altercation.
I take full responsibility for the fact that it is completely ruined. Although it is not my fault.
Will Christine notice the slight modifications?
We spray painted the blue and the black spots, and then we spackled the hole.
On the next.
Now remember, it's not sanded yet.
Coach.
Monday on Channel 8 WROZ.
Marty Aarons and Renee Phillips.
Weeknights on News 8.
Most Americans today have never looked up and seen an eagle on a branch. This is Alaska. Look up.
A lot of what I do goes on behind the scenes. You know, most people aren't exactly on a first-name basis with their State Farm claim representative. They know their agent, but they probably don't know that their agent has a partner, that we're a team, that we've worked on hundreds of claims together. But people take notice when a claim is handled promptly, and you won't get too many complaints if you just treat them fair, because that's when people appreciate what we do and who they're insured with.
Creativity is taking what you know and using it in expanded ways.
Coming up with new ideas, coming up with new products.
It's our ability to be insightful and to provide original solutions to our clients.
We as a firm have been very creative always, and we have been very, I would say, pioneer in many aspects. That's what makes Merrill Lynch different to other world.
Our race commemorates Sir Whitmore's ill-fated expedition to the North Pole. He was told he would have better grip with wide snowshoes, but he insisted on thin. He learned a hard lesson. Wider is better.
Presenting the new Wide-Track Grand Prix Sports Sedan. Its wheels are set wide for better grip to make tracks in any weather.
The spirit still calls.
The new Wide-Track Grand Prix by Pontiac. Wider is better.
It's Sunday morning on CBS, and here again is Charles Osgood.
It wasn't long ago at all that I had the chance to walk just a few blocks from here over to Charles Kuralt's office to talk with him about the book he had just written after yet another journey through America. What was it, I asked him, that so relentlessly kept pulling him out into the country even after so many years of traveling? What was it? It was us. He never got enough, it seemed, of what he found among us whenever he went among us.
My idea was to spend a perfect year to go to a dozen favorite American places, to revisit them, and to be sure I was there at just the right month, just the right time of year to be there. And not to go with all this, the lights and the cameras and everything, but just with a notebook in my hip pocket.
The notebook in our old friend's hip pocket became this: Charles Kuralt's America, 12 chapters, one for every month of the year, about the place in this country to be in every month of the year. This is not so much a book as it is a kind of calendar and a diary of delight, in print or on audio tape.
I'd go alone and without a plan and without a budget, and I wouldn't do anything that felt very much like work. I would drift with the current of life. I'd be footloose and a little irresponsible. Unless you're broke or sick or blue-nosed, I don't see how you could have anything but a good time in New Orleans. Unique is a word that cannot be qualified. It does not mean rare or uncommon. It means alone in the universe. By the standards of grammar and by the grace of God, New Orleans is the unique American place. Eating is the thing, isn't it, in New Orleans? Here's Kevin Belton, a 300-pound chef. He moves like a dancer, at least when he's in the kitchen.
I think you'd have to be suspicious of a very thin chef.
Right, I would too. People in New Orleans believe in living in the present and skimming off as much pleasure as they can today and eating as well as they can tonight. That goes for everybody. If you go to confession and say to the priest, "I overate, Father," you'll have his interest right away. He'll probably ask you, "Where did you eat?" It is a speck of rock in a pastel sea. Palms whisper. Songbirds sing. The place has never known a frost. People spend their days at rest in wicker chairs on gingerbread verandas. Flowers bloom all year, and love is free, without a hint of irony. Everybody calls it paradise. Key West changed me.
What is it about the place that does that to you?
It's the most tolerant place on earth. Many people go by their first names only because of some outstanding warrant or some ex-spouse who may be looking for them, I suppose. Everybody understands that. When spring comes to Charleston, it comes in a showy rush. Visitors clopping along in horse-drawn carriages crane their necks to take it all in. Old Charlestonians, however, seem to accept the season as their birthright. Just another perfect spring in an unbroken line going back to 1670. One year, CBS News sent me off to Moscow in April for a summit conference, and another year to Beijing in the peak daffodil weeks. One of the frustrations of my job was not being able to say, "I'm sorry I can't cover this cosmic event on the other side of the world," because I have to go watch my daffodils bloom. You know, Narcissus was a boy who fell in love with his own reflection in a pool of water. Something like that happened to me. A friend, a daffodil breeder in Virginia, named a daffodil for me. And I didn't know how narcissistic I could be until I saw my own Narcissus blooming in this year of mine. This is Narcissus Charles Kuralt, and a damned good-looking flower it is, too. I've always felt at home in the North Carolina mountains. I don't know why. I was born in Wilmington on the flat coast way at the other end of the state, and brought up in the rolling Piedmont near Charlotte, which passed at the time for a big city. I get no particular tingle in either place. I feel embraced by the mountains. It was raining in Ketchikan. This is like saying it was hilly in San Francisco, or it was crowded in Tokyo, or it was romantic in Paris. It is always raining in Ketchikan. It rained the whole time I was there. I didn't care, but just by being there and being curious, I spent my time this last year with a cowboy and a choir master and a street musician and this wonderful variety of characters.
I think it says something about you, Charles, that you can go back. A lot of people in the news business just pretty much burn their bridges when they leave.
That's right. That's true. Most reporters stick their noses in where they're not wanted and make enemies of some kind. Well, they're real reporters. I never was one of those. This is your friend Kuralt paddling his own canoe.
You look pretty happy there.
I am happy there. You know, anybody would be happy. You can paddle this canoe across this lake, Moose Lake, and camp, and put the canoe in another lake the next day and paddle across that lake and camp and make another little portage to the next lake the third day, and so on. And you can do that for 100 years and never visit all the lakes. I didn't get over my boat dream the whole time I was in Maine. I'm not over it yet. I am drawn to shipyards and anchorages wherever I go. If there's a bit of a breeze, the sound of a halyard slapping a mast arouses a great yearning in me. I had a schooner captain say to me, the Gulf of Maine is one of the 2 best sailing grounds in all the world. And I bit. I said, I don't doubt it. What's the other one? He said, I haven't found that one yet. I saw my first ring-necked pheasant flush from the tall grass of Montana, and saw my first trumpeter swans riding the current of the Yellowstone. I'd never seen wild horses until I beheld a herd of them, manes flying, galloping through a canyon in the Pryor Mountains. I saw my first antelope-covered hillside in Montana and heard my first elk bugling.
There are other places in this diary of delight: Vermont, New Mexico, New York City at Christmas time. But these are not things to be summarized. These are things to be savored. That was the whole point of Charles Kuralt's perfect year, to savor and to admire his subject. His subject is America.
It was the freest year of my life. Some nights I could hardly get to sleep during this past year. I was so excited by the things that had happened during the day.
I miss the earth so much. I miss my wife on such a timeless flight. And I think it's gonna be a long, long time till touchdown brings me round again to find. Oh no, 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 I'm a rocket man, rocket man.
Looking for historically high-performing mutual funds? You'll find lots of them and more right here. Mutual Fund OneSource from Schwab. 600 funds, no loads. Call for the select list free or get it all online at schwab.com right now. This is investing the way it should be.
What does it take for an airline to close a deal these days? Teamwork. Planners, schedulers, finance guys, you name it, you'll need it. But if you work for British Airways, you don't need to fly everyone in. You bring them together with the help of IBM. You see, IBM's GroupWare solution helps the airline sales force bring the whole team to the table. If IBM did it for them, they can probably do it for you.
Super Bowl Sunday 1996. Publishers Clearinghouse catches Patricia DiNardo on her way to bed.
Just won $10 million.
Patricia's disappearing act shocks the TV audience. In another live broadcast, viewers catch the first ever straight from the shower winning moments. This August 14th, anything can happen when the Prize Patrol brings Super Bowl excitement to summer and surprises a new $1 million winner live on TV. Enter today and it could happen to you.
Honey, I'll be late, start dinner.
Everybody's got their like it like this.
Andy's Bunny Spoon is in the dishwasher.
Everybody's got their like it like that.
Remember, Andy hates carrots.
But no matter where you go, one thing every mom knows.
Remember, Andy gets the Catalina or she won't eat.
Everybody's got a taste for
Moms know everybody has a favorite Kraft dressing, like sweet, tangy Kraft Catalina.
Everybody's got a taste for Kraft. Where's my bunny cup?
Of all the Sunday morning broadcasts Charles Kuralt anchored, the one he spoke of most proudly was the one we are about to show you a little bit of now. If you saw the broadcast we are talking about in 1986, you will surely remember what may have been two of the most moving hours of music and of feeling the television cameras have ever captured. That morning began with Charles Kuralt in Moscow.
In the year 1925, a young pianist left Russia to seek his fortune in the world. His visa granted him permission to be gone for 6 months. He was gone for 61 years. He returned last week, carrying his American passport as the great celebrated pianist of the world. This morning, in one of the most eagerly anticipated musical events of this century, Vladimir Horowitz will play again in the country of his birth. In just a few minutes from now, at the age of 81, the last of the dazzling, romantic virtuosos of the piano will step onto the stage of the Great Hall of the Moscow Conservatory, and there will be a climax of memory and of emotion. And here he is, dressed in his cutaway and striped pants, looking like a performer of the last century, and the audience is on its feet, applauding this man who last played the piano in this room more than 60 years ago.
This morning, for comfort's sake, we call on the spirit of Vladimir Horowitz to play for the spirit of Charles Kuralt.
We view this as a time of opportunity. Asia does bring with it a feeling that it's something different, it's emerging, it's exotic. For us, it's home. These are our local markets. These are not foreign markets. And I think to have that local knowledge really is something that you cannot substitute for. Prudential Asia is very well positioned to access and cover the Asian market.
helps make your life a little more special, a little more comfortable, a little more fun, chances are we're part of it. America's electric utility companies.
Introducing a new kind of Fixodent. A Fixodent with no artificial flavors or colors. Introducing new Fixodent Free. Fixodent holds stronger longer than any free adhesive or your money back. Guaranteed. Fixodent and forget it with new Fixodent Free.
My uncle took Tylenol for his hands. Hours later, hurts back, took more.
Doctor said Aleve is strong. Just 2 and I'm good all day. I was taking 4 Advil or 8 Tylenol.
Aleve is all he needed.
Aleve.
Looking for more space? Try the next Century. It's got the most interior space of any vehicle in its class. Because extra space is one luxurious touch that's appreciated by families everywhere. The all-new Century by Buick.
You know, it's easy to solve family problems on TV, but at home, we all have to do it without a script. That takes work, love, and sometimes a little help. We think about that every time we do a new episode of Promised Land. And every time we hear from someone who says we've made a difference.
CBS, welcome home.
He loved this country, but of all the places in it, he loved North Carolina most. It was in North Carolina that he was born, and it will be in North Carolina now that he is buried. So that is where we leave you this morning. Not in any one part of North Carolina, but here and there and all around the place that meant so much to our good friend, Charles Kuralt.
For the time of your life. This is a demonstration. With all the lucent wireless systems and technology out there, this is now just about the only place where you can't stay in touch. Lucent Technologies. We make the things that make communications work.
When Wall Street served up its stock du jour, the manager of Steinrow Growth and Income Fund dined elsewhere. He looked for the undervalued, the unfairly maligned, and whatever it took to find them, he did. Who knew to go with him? Over half are customers of Mutual Fund OneSource from Schwab, where over 600 no-load funds are all in one place, along with the tools to choose them. Call now and get our select list free. Investing the way it should be.
What did you eat this weekend?
A couple of burgers Friday night.
A couple of donuts.
2 tacos.
Barbecue ribs. Chocolate cheesecake Saturday night.
Some pancakes for brunch. Gee, that's funny. I should have exploded about an hour ago.
If you kind of ate your way through the weekend, start turning things around tomorrow with Kellogg's Special K cereal. Just 110 calories, not a speck of fat. Get those delicious, lightly toasted Special K flakes. Let your taste buds continue to enjoy. Start taking off what you took on this weekend. Make Monday Special K Day.
Next week, on the occasion of Andrew Wyeth's 80th birthday, Sunday morning we'll spend time with the first family of American art. And that is all. We are loath to let go, but there's no choice. It was on Easter Sunday of 1994 that he sat here last and bade farewell to you viewers of Sunday Morning. He always did say everything best, and so I think we will let him do what we cannot bring ourselves to do. In any event, we could not say goodbye to him as well as he said goodbye to us with a poem by Clarence Day.
Farewell, my friends, farewell and hail. I'm off to seek the Holy Grail. I cannot tell you why. Remember, please, when I am gone, 'twas aspiration led me on. Tiddly, widdly, toodaloo, all I want is to stay with you. But here I go. Goodbye.
you.